Yes. Now, you see, I have my own handicap, which is a terrible memory. Some people call it a disease. I call it getting older. And John, that's your name, right? Now, I shared with this audience my deprived background, and you shared with us your Jesuit background. Yeah. And I appreciate you did that. Because what you express expresses a certainty that one would expect that is part of a Jesuit background. There is a morality and there is immorality. Life is clear. That's what one gets from many religions, from many ideologies. I would not see the world quite that way. I see that there are many views of morality, many views of what is justice, and the kind of certainty, even the use of the term moral competence. Competence is a general skill to evaluate what is moral, what is right, that allows one to look at the situational aspects of things. And I see a certain problem in the certainty and the singularity that you described.
I'm a recovering Catholic. So I absolutely agree with you. I think, well said. I think we have to be really, really careful about a certainty that predisposes individuals to, in ways that, as Jennifer would suggest, that would support levels of social injustice. I think you have to be really careful with that. I have to tell you that I believe in the inclusion, for example, of folks with disabilities. I believe in a notion of disability as a cultural experience and as an epistemic asset. And that has brought me to the realization of things that have exceeded my, if you will, religious training. The thing that I really want to emphasize is that one of the things that is emphasized in the Institute for Sathya Education is unity in diversity. That is, it's a shared experience. It's an emphasis on shared experience and an understanding and getting kids to see those shared experiences. So I don't think I could say it really any better than you said it, other than to just, elaborate a little bit more. But I'm in total agreement with you.
I actually TA for Dr. Weston at San Diego State in his Intro to Ethics class, and one of the things that I was hoping to see you, jockey for was pre-college philosophy. And the reason that I say that is because I grade a lot of freshman exams, and a lot of them don't have any idea what ethics really are. And you would think that if we can get 16-year-olds to pass advanced placement exams, we could do Intro to Ethics in high school. I don't think there's anything illogical about or impossible about that. And to the gentleman's question over here, well, no, there's no objective morality, but what we want to do is arm our students with the tools, the analytical moral tools, so that they can look at someone's actions, judge it to be moral or immoral, and then say why. And that, is to promote the democratic citizenship of all of the students that we raise here. We want to create a situation where if presented with evidence contrary to your opinion, you would be forced to change that. And that's what I think Mr. Johnson is trying to promote and say, hey, there is no one right ethical system, but we want you to be able to look at a system, say why it's ethical or unethical, and then change your judgments on it. That's what I think that you were, one of the things I think I would hope that you would promote is that pre-college philosophy is kind of essential.
If I could clarify, I think you're making some really good points, but I would like to clarify my position a little bit, and I thank you for bringing your points up because I don't want to I don't want people walking away or misunderstanding this particular point. We're not in the business in the Institute for Social Science Education of telling people what's right and what's wrong. We're in the business, if you will, of drawing out of what we fundamentally believe that all kids are. In other words, this you already have, truth. You know the difference, if you will, between right and wrong. You know what love is. You know what peace is. You know what nonviolence is. Those are fundamental beliefs. That's related back to the literature where belief systems have a very strong positive correlation with achievement. Now, that said, I want to agree with you, but I would just be happy if every teacher preparation course or program required students to take a course in the philosophy of education. That would be a really good start. And I'm probably pitching something for you guys. And the history of education. I have students who have no idea why they are in the school and the way it's structured and want to work in those environments. To me, that's irrational. Going back to my Jesuit education, by the way. Okay? And I'm talking about logic here. I'm not talking about certainty. I'm talking about just basic reasoning. Okay? Thank you.
Thanks. So to go back to this point about the different moralities, so there was this study that Ogbu and Furdham did where they suggested that the reason that some African-American kids were not achieving was because they were afraid of acting white and like exhibiting white values. And then people that went on to refute some of what they argue showed that when you ask kids from whatever background they are, right, what do they subscribe to the value of hard work or the value of love or, all of these values, turns out you don't really find these differences that might be suggested by the research. However, I do think that you do find differences in how different groups interpret these values, and in particular, what they think they require of them in terms of behavior. So even if you get agreement from various kids that love is a good thing, what that actually means in terms of what you do, given that you have that value, might look very different, in one context as opposed to another context, and one community as opposed to another community. And I'm just wondering how you have your teachers negotiate that, in particular if they come from a community that has a very different understanding of how that value should be informing action than the kids' community that they're serving.
Well, I think you're asking, and to support your statement, the interesting literature that comes out that in the area of special education is in the area of self-determination. For example, in an Anglo-European perspective of self-determination, you pick yourself up by your bootstraps and you do your thing, etc. But if you look at, for example, the definition of self-determination in South Asian countries or East Asian countries or Indigenous Americans or Latino and Mexican American cultures, there would be no sense that an individual with a disability would be taken from the family and expected to do things independently of the family. So the definition and the interpretation of, for example, self-determination takes into account, or has to take into account, those cultural interpretations. And we really emphasize that's understanding difference and expecting that there's a unity of values within the difference. That first you have to understand the difference. You have to understand the interpretation, and you teach to those interpretations. You don't teach to your own interpretation of it. So we're not teaching you how you should think. We're teaching you, we're trying to discover, what is your interpretation? What do you think about it? How does it appear in the way you act, the way you behave, the way you talk to your family, etc.? And then we enhance what we think might be good, or what the family might want, or what they feel good about. And the ultimate objective is that we're not going to get into areas around, for example, self-determination is not something I know a lot about teaching in my field, but I don't particularly address in this context. But you are so right in being sensitive to those kinds of interpretations and allowing authentic members of those communities to define what those interpretations are, and then identifying the alignment and the values across those interpretations.
Hi, thanks. I want to piggyback off of Professor Morton's question and ask about how the negotiations between teachers who've gone through this course with the institutional values that are already in place. So on the cultural level, that's you can see that in certain societies, but I've been thinking about it as a TA at UCSD for the past 2 quarters, and I'd like to build in valuing failure, but I'm butting up against an evaluative structure, the grading system, the A through F system, that punishes failure. So to try to get my students to not be scared of saying quote unquote wrong answers has been a real struggle, because I am within a system that they have learned over time punishes failure. So if you could talk to that a little bit, that'd be great. Thank you.
Okay, I'm not sure I'm clear. I'm going to give you a response, but and it's a really overly simplistic response, but I'm not sure, and if I misunderstood, please correct me. We don't evaluate or grade the kids, period. That's a no-no in the field. The kids have to eventually evaluate themselves. We may give them tools and identify ways in which they can check in. Kind of comes out of the self-efficacy literature. Have you achieved the goal? How do you want to look? How do you want to appear? And how do you want to behave? And did this feel good? Did this not feel good? And it's more self-reflective. And I'd say it's almost, I wouldn't say it's more, it's entirely self-reflective. It's about self-inquiry. So we're not giving kids grades or percentages or assessing them. And we don't teach anything about assessment of those values. That would be going back to Michael's concerns and Jennifer's concerns about the very crude instrumentalization. You have to be really careful. I'm treading some really thin ice here, and we are as well. The thing is we want kids to be transformative, but they have to do the work, not us. So they have to evaluate it. I hope that does that answer your question?
Question is, are you envisioning people who learn how to teach in this way, but they may find themselves in institutional settings that do not share those values? Have you heard stories back about how that gets negotiated?
Yes, it doesn't. And I hate to be flip about it, but education, unfortunately, is one of the most difficult systems to get folks to shift changes in thinking. And if our approach is we go pretty much where we're wanted, and that to us is okay. We're not trying to do this for everyone. Everybody doesn't need the Institute for Sathya Education. Everybody doesn't believe in it, and that's okay too. So people want to work with us, that's great, but trying to make those kinds of shifts again goes against the grain of what we believe, and that is that you have to be what you want to live. You have to want this, and if it's not for you, then then we're good with that.
I think we're going to have to stop there and take a break now. So we'll have about a 15-minute break.